Hi, this is Dr. Steve Soifer, and I'm continuing my YouTube series. And this is the second part of a video that I did to introduce people to paruresis and how to treat it. A lot of this is based on the book that I wrote with several others called The Secret Social Phobia. So for more detailed information, you would go to Amazon.com and you can get a copy of the book, and it will go into much more detail on each of these subjects. So I'm going to pick up here and talk a little bit about what we call micturition dynamics and how it is that we're even able to urinate or pee in the first place. So as we drink fluid, the bladder expands. The bladder is a muscle, by the way. So it's an urban myth that it would, if you drink too much, that it would eventually pop. And as it fills up, a series of mechanisms go into place where a signal is sent to the brain that it's time to urinate. The urethra, which connects from the tip of the penis to the bladder, which obviously is connected to the kidneys, allows the urine to travel from the urine outside the body. So what's important is that there's a series of contractions and relaxations that occur to allow us to urinate. The bladder needs to contract, and at the same time, the muscles in the pelvic floor need to relax in order for us to go. And these are referred to sphincter muscles. There's an internal sphincter muscle between the urethra and the bladder neck that is closed. And then there's an external sphincter muscle that needs to open, that we voluntarily relax to urinate. So what happens for people with paruresis, as best we know, is that we get a signal from the brain that it's time to urinate, and that causes the internal sphincter muscle to open, and the urine is supposed to flow from the bladder through the urethra to outside the body. And somewhere along the way, that mechanism gets bottled up. We think that the problem is with the internal sphincter muscle, that it simply stays shut and doesn't release. But more recent evidence may indicate it's more complicated than that, and that the external sphincter, which should be under voluntary control, may also not open. So in other words, there may be both muscles that relax and don't relax that relate to the external sphincter. Micturition or urination is a pretty complicated process. And ultimately, we'll need to do even more research to figure out exactly where the problem is. And that may eventually lead to some possible medications that could help in the process. The next section I'd like to talk about is the etiology or origins of paruresis. And there are many possible explanations. I'm going to give you an example, almost a list of possibilities, and then my best guess as to which is most common. So here is the list I have. Sexual abuse, traumatic incident, the inability to express hostility, an internalized wish for punishment, the unconscious association of urination with sexuality, urologic disease, fright or embarrassment, anxiety arousal caused by quote unquote personal space invasion, biochemical, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, cultural variables, for example, living in a puritanical society, and toilet training. Now, I will add to that something that is sort of obvious and probably, from my point of view, the most common cause of paruresis, and I'll just call it bullying. And this happened to me, and it happens to a lot of people, where someone teases you in the bathroom or makes some comments, could be a parent, a friend, enemies, and that this causes you to freeze up and could set in paruresis as well. But as I mentioned before, there are potential biological or urological disease issues. So it's very important to have a thorough checkup and make sure that there isn't something physically wrong. And the litmus test is pretty simple. If you can easily go at home, but have difficulty going out in public, then it's most likely the social phobia nature of the disorder and primarily psychological in nature. Now I want to talk briefly about assessing paruresis, and we've made some significant progress in this area. Probably the very first scale that was developed, the Leibowitz Social Anxiety Scale, should be mentioned. This was in the mid-'80s, and essentially he had one question about whether you had difficulty going in public. And so that would give some indication if someone might have paruresis. We also have what's called the Seufer-Himmeley scale, which is in our book. It's a series of about 10 questions. Pretty simple, straightforward, not empirically tested, but if, for example, a urologist was screening for this problem, it would probably give a pretty good indication of whether or not someone has paruresis. And then most recently, there's something called the Deakin scale that's been developed. This has been validated and shown to be quite reliable. It's a little lengthy, but much more robust in terms of being able to tell whether someone has paruresis or not.